December 8, 1883. Bisbee, Arizona was booming. Nestled in the Mule Mountains of southeastern Arizona Territory, the town had transformed almost overnight from a rugged mining camp into one of the most important copper-producing communities in the American Southwest. The Copper Queen Mine was attracting miners, merchants, investors, and fortune seekers from across the country. Money flowed through the town daily. Businesses were opening, new buildings were appearing, and Bisbee's future seemed brighter than ever. But prosperity often attracts danger. On a cold December evening, 6 armed men rode into town believing they had found an easy payday. Their target was Goldwater and Castaneda's store, one of the town's busiest mercantile businesses. Rumors had spread that the store was holding thousands of dollars in payroll money destined for the Copper Queen Mine. The robbery should have lasted only a few minutes. Instead, it erupted into chaos. Gunfire echoed through the streets. Citizens ran for cover. When the shooting finally stopped, multiple people were dead, including a deputy sheriff and a pregnant woman. The crime would shock the Arizona Territory and trigger one of the largest manhunts in its history. This is the story of the Bisbee Massacre. To understand the massacre, it's important to understand Bisbee itself. In the early 1880s, southeastern Arizona was still very much a frontier. The region was rugged, remote, and often dangerous. Apache conflicts had only recently begun to decline, and law enforcement was spread thin across vast stretches of territory. Despite the dangers, prospectors continued to search for valuable mineral deposits. In 1877, rich copper ore was discovered in the hills surrounding what would eventually become Bisbee. The discovery changed everything. Mining operations expanded rapidly, attracting workers from across the United States and beyond. As the mines grew, so did the town. Businesses opened to serve the growing population. Saloons, boarding houses, restaurants, and general stores lined the dusty streets. By 1883, Bisbee had become one of the fastest-growing communities in Arizona Territory. With growth came opportunity, but opportunity also attracted criminals. Large amounts of cash regularly moved through town. Mine payrolls were often transported physically, making them tempting targets for thieves and outlaws. Word spread quickly throughout the territory whenever large sums of money were expected. And eventually, the wrong people heard those rumors. Somewhere beyond Bisbee, a group of 6 men began planning a robbery. The details of their early conversations have largely been lost to history, but investigators later concluded that the gang believed Goldwater and Castaneda's store contained payroll funds connected to the Copper Queen Mine. If the information was correct, the reward could be substantial. The men saw an opportunity. Rather than targeting a stagecoach or an isolated traveler, they would strike directly in town. It was a bold plan, and it was also incredibly risky. Unlike a remote robbery, any violence in Bisbee would bring immediate attention from citizens, miners, and law enforcement. But the gang moved forward anyway. On December 8, 1883, they rode into town. Armed and determined, they approached their target. What happened next would forever become part of Arizona history. As evening settled over Bisbee, customers were still inside Goldwater and Castaneda's store. The business was a central gathering place in town, serving miners and residents alike. Without warning, the armed men entered. They quickly attempted to take control of the store and its occupants. At first, the robbery appeared to be proceeding according to plan. But then, something changed. Whether it was resistance from employees, confusion among the robbers, or simple panic, the situation began to unravel. Within moments, gunfire erupted. The robbery was no longer a robbery. It had become a massacre. Shots rang out inside and outside the building. People nearby heard the commotion and scrambled to safety. Others rushed toward the danger, unaware of what awaited them. Among them was Deputy Sheriff Tom Smith. His response would place him directly in the path of the violence. Deputy Sheriff Tom Smith was among the first to respond. As gunfire echoed through the streets of Bisbee, Smith moved toward the danger rather than away from it. In a frontier mining town, law enforcement officers often faced overwhelming odds, and this night would be no different. As the robbery spiraled out of control, shots were fired in multiple directions. The violence was sudden, chaotic, and indiscriminate. In the confusion, Deputy Smith was struck by gunfire. He would become one of the first victims of the attack. But the tragedy did not end there. Among those caught in the violence was Annie Roberts. Annie was pregnant at the time of the robbery and had no connection to the crime unfolding around her. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. When the shooting ended, Annie lay mortally wounded. Her death shocked the community. In a town accustomed to the dangers of mining and frontier life, the murder of an innocent pregnant woman struck a particularly deep nerve. The robbery that had begun as a quest for money had become something far worse. By the end of the attack, multiple people had been killed and others seriously wounded. The streets of Bisbee were filled with panic. Residents emerged cautiously from buildings and alleyways. Families searched for loved ones. Business owners locked their doors. And everywhere, people asked the same question: who were the men responsible? The robbers knew they could not remain in Bisbee. Their plan had failed. Rather than slipping away with a fortune, they had left behind a scene of carnage that would guarantee a massive response from authorities. The gang fled town as quickly as possible, but Arizona territory was not an easy place to disappear. The rugged desert landscape presented challenges for both fugitives and pursuers. News of the massacre spread rapidly. Law enforcement officers, local citizens, and posses began organizing almost immediately. The murders had transformed what might have been considered a robbery into one of the most serious crimes in territorial Arizona. There would be no shortage of volunteers willing to hunt the killers down. As word traveled across the region, descriptions of the suspects followed. The search expanded beyond Bisbee. Every trail, ranch, stage stop, and settlement became a potential lead. The pressure on the fugitives increased with every passing day. Eventually, the law began closing in. The pursuit of the suspects became one of the largest manhunts Arizona territory had ever seen. Investigators followed leads across vast stretches of the Southwest. Witnesses were interviewed. Posses tracked movements through remote areas. Gradually, authorities began identifying the men believed to have participated in the massacre. Arrests followed. One by one, members of the gang were taken into custody. For the citizens of Bisbee, each capture represented a step toward justice. But the investigation also raised new questions. Who had organized the robbery? Who was truly responsible for the bloodshed? And had every participant been identified? As suspects were brought back to face trial, public attention intensified. The people of Bisbee wanted answers. More importantly, they wanted accountability. The deaths of Deputy Smith, Annie Roberts, and the other victims had left scars that would not easily heal. The courtroom would now determine the fate of the accused. The trials attracted widespread attention. Newspapers covered the proceedings closely, and citizens followed every development. Evidence was presented. Witnesses testified. Prosecutors argued that the defendants had participated in a robbery that directly resulted in multiple deaths. The defense attempted to challenge aspects of the case, but public sentiment had already turned sharply against the accused. The massacre had horrified the territory. Many believed severe punishment was the only acceptable outcome. Ultimately, several members of the gang were convicted and sentenced to death. Executions followed. For many residents, the verdicts represented justice. Yet one figure remained particularly controversial, a man named John Heath. Authorities believed Heath had played a key role in planning the robbery. Although he was convicted, his sentence was less severe than many citizens expected. That decision would have deadly consequences. While several members of the gang received death sentences through the courts, many residents of Bisbee believed one man had escaped true justice. That man was John Heath. Authorities believed Heath had played a key role in organizing the robbery. Although he was convicted and sentenced to prison, many citizens felt the punishment was far too lenient considering the lives that had been lost. Anger spread throughout the community. The deaths of Deputy Tom Smith, Annie Roberts, and the other victims were still fresh in the minds of residents. For many, the legal system had failed. Then, on February 22, 1884, events took a dramatic turn. A mob gathered outside the jail. Fueled by outrage and a desire for revenge, the group forced their way inside and seized Heath. There would be no appeal, no second trial, no chance for clemency. The mob dragged Heath through the streets and ultimately hanged him from a telegraph pole. The lynching shocked observers across Arizona territory. Even in the rough and tumble days of the American frontier, vigilante justice remained controversial. Some residents viewed the mob as heroes. Others believed they had become criminals themselves. The debate continues to this day. Did John Heath receive the justice he deserved? Or was he denied the legal protections that should have applied to every citizen? The answer depends largely on who is telling the story. The Bisbee Massacre quickly became one of the most infamous crimes in Arizona history. Newspapers throughout the Southwest covered the story extensively. For residents of Bisbee, the massacre served as a painful reminder that prosperity and violence often traveled hand in hand on the frontier. The same mines that brought wealth to the region also attracted thieves, outlaws, and opportunists. As the years passed, Bisbee continued to grow. The Copper Queen mine expanded. New buildings replaced old ones. Generations came and went. Yet the memory of that December night remained. Today, visitors walking the historic streets of Bisbee may not immediately realize they are standing in the shadow of one of Arizona Territory's most notorious crimes. The storefronts have changed. The dusty roads have become paved streets, but the story remains. The victims are remembered. The killers are remembered, and the questions surrounding justice, revenge, and frontier law still echo through Arizona history. More than 140 years have passed since 6 armed men rode into Bisbee, searching for easy money. Instead, they left behind tragedy. The Bisbee Massacre claimed innocent lives, devastated families, and forever changed one of Arizona's most important mining towns. It also revealed something about life in the American frontier. In a place where law enforcement was limited and communities often felt isolated, justice could take many forms. Sometimes it came through the courtroom. Sometimes it came at the end of a rope. Whether viewed as a cautionary tale, a historical tragedy, or one of Arizona's most fascinating crimes, the Bisbee Massacre remains an important chapter in the story of the American Southwest. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing to Historic Crime Stories for more forgotten crimes, unsolved mysteries, and dark chapters from the mining towns and frontier communities of the American West. And as always, let me know in the comments, do you think John Heath received justice? Or did the people of Bisbee go too far?